Hello everyone. I beat a game called Limbo a couple years ago. It was a game that was really up my alley. There's a lot of problem solving, and the scenery and everything, the aesthetics of the game, were very creative and interesting. You wake up in the woods, a little boy who's looking for his lost sister.
She calls me day and night. I'm sorry, girl, you just don't make me feel.
It's a beautiful game. I like games where the aesthetics are a little different. So this monochrome adventure was really nice. Here recently I got the craving to do a book nook with this theme. This game was made by Playdead games. I've played another one of their games. So far everything I've played by them was really awesome.
If everything was good, then you would feel alive. If everything was good, then you would feel alive. Everything was good, then you would feel alive. If everything was good, then you would feel alive.
So now that you have an idea for the feel and the aesthetics of the game, we'll just get right into how to actually make a Limbo themed book nook. First, we're going to have to start with some wood. Out of this wood, I'm going to try to make 3 of the sides of the book nook. Right now, I'm measuring the thickness of the wood. That's going to come into play in just a minute. We gotta decide how wide and how tall this book nook's going to be, and we're gonna mark it off. I thought I knew how wide I wanted this to be, so I just split the difference for the walls. Another less thoughtful way of doing this would be to just roughly estimate how wide you want it to be and mark out one side to where it looks good, then just emulate that same measurement on the other side. In most cases, that should work out quite well. Now right here, I'm using a speed square to finish out my lines. Unfortunately, I didn't realize until after the fact that the piece of wood I was cutting out wasn't square. I ended up adjusting it off camera. You might have noticed that I have a bunch of vertical lines drawn here, not just 2. What I'm doing is creating the little teeth for a box joint, while remembering to accommodate the width of this sheet of wood. This will keep the sides locked in the proper place, as well as allowing everything to fit together evenly. I'm making this particular cut with my Japanese saw. Out of all the saws that I have, I feel like this is the one that I have the most control over. One day I hope to have a table saw. That's what I would use if I could. So for my Patreon members, that's what I want is a table saw. Just kidding, I don't have a Patreon. So I just marked out all the pieces that I want to cut out and all the pieces I want to keep, and now I'm bringing it over to the bandsaw. First, I'm going to come in and make all of these easy cuts. If you can, you want to stay to the inside of the line, that way the width of the blade doesn't take away too much wood. Now I have to come in and carve out all of these negative spaces, which there's a little trick to doing this on a saw like this. The saw can't make a 90-degree cut, so you have to cut out a curve and then come back and get that remaining corner. This same method works on a jigsaw as well. For all of my students, let's zoom in and take a closer look at what I'm doing here. So right now I'm just cutting in a curve, trying to get to that straight line there. Then I'm going to follow that line down all the way to the cut that I previously made. Now that the first step is done, I'm going to turn around and get that remaining corner. In all seriousness, students, always turn the saw off before removing any excess wood by the blade. It might be slower, but it's better than walking around with a nickname like Stubby. To turn this particular saw on, you pull the switch out, and to turn it off, you just smash it in case there's an emergency. You don't really have to think too much, you just smash the button. Now we're ready to put this thing together. I'm adding in the wood glue to make it nice and strong. Once the glue is added, I can go ahead and try to put the walls together, and I did this by putting a wedge in and using a speed square just to make sure that the walls were 90 degrees. Another way to do this would have been to cut out a 90-degree back and then use that to keep the sides straight. As the piece was drying, I started looking at it and I thought that this book nook was far too wide. So I'll pull it back apart and use the left wall as a template to retrace out my joints, this time making it a proper width. One short trip to the bandsaw later, and I'm back and better than ever. There, that's much better. Now I just want to mock it up to an actual book and just kind of see what it's going to look like, since I obviously can't be left to my own understanding of spatial relationships. Before I glue on the other side, I'm going to use it as a boilerplate so I know how wide to make the back. So I'm going to mark these out with a pencil, then I'm going to come back with my speed square and make sure they're perfect 90-degree angles. Let's mock it up again, leaving a little space in the back. This recess will accommodate the battery pack and the switch and everything else it's going to take to make this thing have a backlight. Now that we know it's going to work, let's put this thing in for real. Time to get serious with some glue. The sides should be 90 degrees, so now all we have to do is use our speed square to focus on the back and make sure it is 90 degrees forwards and backwards. Then it's on to cutting out our scenery and our figures. I printed this black and white image out on my printer, and I'm going to mount it to a piece of mat board that I apparently found in a gutter somewhere. I would usually use spray glue for something like this. That's what I prefer, and I think it works the best. But I can't find my spray glue. We had some bond work done at school, and I lost some stuff during the move, and so every so often I just realize that I'm missing something. Let's add a little weight to this thing so it's good and pressed. I went a little ham with the acrylic medium and it got a little wrinkly, but it shouldn't matter in the end. I'm going to put another layer on the top to seal it in and make this kind of more of a plastic finish. Scalpel, please. Now it's time to surgically remove some of these objects for our book nook. Due to my malpractice, unfortunately, this surgery turned into a murder. I'm impatient, so I started cutting this out way before it was dry. Deciding it was the universe that was wrong and not me, I chose to go ahead and use scissors to advance the process without waiting. All I really need is the shape. I don't really care about the ink. I'm going to paint over every bit of this. I just thought it'd be nice to kind of use some of the actual trees from the game. Now that the pieces are all cut out, it's time to mock them up and try to figure out where I want to place all of these pieces. I have a rough idea in my mind, but nothing's set in stone. Time to create the hero of our book nook. Once again, we're going to use scissors to free him from his pressed board prison, because life is just too short to wait on acrylic paint to dry. It would have been better to use spray adhesive. It would have been better to wait for it to dry and use an X-Acto knife. But after much fiddling around, I was able to finally free this boy. My boy. My little boy. My special boy. As you can see, this took some doing. I'm just viciously going after his face, trying to clean it up like a mother to a real child. Now we can paint these shabby little trees just in time for Christmas. I've laid them on my silicone palette, that way cleanup will be very, very easy. This allows me to paint like a madman, and I don't have to be careful about where I get my paint. I'm just painting each tree successively lighter to make it look further away. In real life, the further things go away from you, the lighter they appear because you're looking through more atmosphere. And this game does have a very atmospheric effect. I just keep mixing in a little more white for each tree. Now to fix my boy. To me, he's perfect just the way he was, but I'm doing this for you guys. Feels like just a day or maybe two since I saw you, but now I won't come back around. I'm carefully painting around the eyes to leave them white. I thought about drilling holes in them and let the backlight of the book Nook shine through them because his eyes kind of seem to glow in the game. But I realized that my light probably wouldn't be strong enough, so I decided just to keep the white of the paper underneath. Now I'm painting the inside of the book Nook. I really globbed on the paint impasto so that we would have a lot of texture and kind of make it look like ground. Once again, I mock things up, that way I can decide where I want to place these trees before I glue it in for good. And I also want to place in some hills and things like that made out of styrofoam, and I gotta know where the tree is to know where the hill is. I'm just dipping my styrofoam hill in acrylic paint because that works as a really strong glue. Then I'm hot gluing in my trees. Then I'm giving it a quick once over with my brush, that way I can hide any of the hot glue. Adding some more acrylic paint, that way I can lock in another little styrofoam hill here. Once I decide where I want it, I can go ahead and coat it in more acrylic paint. I'm also going to lay in a few more other scraps just to kind of bulk this stuff up and lay paint on top of it, make my hill a little bigger, and I was just going to throw the stuff away anyway, so it might as well act as filler. Right now I'm mocking up another tree that I'm going to glue to the opposite wall. I just need to know how high it's going to be and how far back it's going to be. That lets me know where to glue it to the wall and where to place this styrofoam hill. Everything gets a coat of acrylic paint for unity and to help seal it in. And I'm painting the back white so that it might help lighten up the piece a little. I don't know if it's going to make much effect because I'm going to end up putting a diffuser in front of it. Time to mock up this tree one last time before I hot glue it in place. Get it lined up, draw a line marking where it needs to be. That way I know where to put my hot glue. There, that should do it. Time to close it up and see if it still works. Perfect. Now it's time to add one more tree. Now I'm trying to lock it in place, but it keeps wanting to fall over. So now I have to find some kind of object to prop it up right with until the acrylic paint dries. With a little bit of wrestling, this foam block should do the trick. On second thought, I better not. Here I have my wiring harness and LED light strip from my anglerfish mask. If you watched that video, you know I changed directions and didn't end up using it. The good news is I can use it here. I just made a small hole here to run the wires through. Now, like any good father, I'm going to turn my attention back to the little child that I have created. I'm going to lay in some more acrylic paint here to act as glue on the back to hold on his appendages. It'll also thicken him up and make him look a little less flat, though I wasn't real concerned with that because everything does look flat on the game. Now I'm just adding a little more paint to the back to make it more solidified and smooth. The LED cable setup that I had for the anglerfish mask ended up being way too long for this book Nook, so I cut a section out. With that section removed, I'll just strip these wires and reconnect them together. Twist. With a little heat shrink, it should look good as new. I like it because it's durable and it looks professional. The trick is remembering to slide it on before you connect your wires together, which, if I'm being completely honest, I don't always remember to do. Now that those are in place, we can put in our connector. As you can see, I took the LEDs out. I'm going to have to put a new strip in because I want way more LEDs in this than what would have went in that anglerfish mask. So I will just twist these together really quickly. Then I will slide the heat shrink down in place and use my heat gun to finish the job. Now it's time to add a longer strip of LEDs to this project. I'm just measuring out about how long of a strip I can fit in this piece, cutting it on the correct line. Take a few minutes to bumble around and find the end that I want to use in the connector, then peel back a little bit of this paper that protects the sticker so that I can put this end inside the connector. You guys have seen me do this before, but I'll show you again. We want to press those two little copper strips underneath those tabs. All right, that looks good, so it's time to close the connector and complete this task. Works like a charm. After peeling off the little protective strip, I tried to use the adhesive on the back of the LEDs to stick to the book nook, but it just wasn't strong enough. So later on, I have to reinforce it with a little bit of hot glue. One of the things I noticed by mocking this up is that the LEDs needed to be diffused, so I think a piece of tissue paper will do nicely for that. Before I can install that though, I have to finish making the scenery on the inside. I'm adding a few more scenery elements, and I'm also going to change the values of everything in here. Because when I mocked it up, I also noticed that everything was too dark once I put the lid and the walls on this book nook. So it looked good just out in the open, but it becomes a lot darker once you put it in the shadow. So I want to go ahead and rectify that. And yes, I know that's not a breaking news flash that things get darker in the shadows, but it just wasn't something I was thinking about when I first started. And that's one of the reasons I think that mocking up your piece over and over again is a great idea. Because it constantly points out all the little oversights that you have. You can't think of everything all at once. The human mind is incredibly powerful, but, it's not perfect. So once I get through laying in lighter values on everything, you'll see I come back by with a little bit cleaner brush and try to blend in some smoother transitions from one value to the next. This is something you didn't have to deal with in the game because the pieces were very much like play cutout scenery or something like that for theater, but it's something we have to deal with in here because we actually have a real diorama that we're working with in 3 dimensions. Now, while the paint's drying on this, I'm going to go ahead and add some shorts to my boy. I think I'm going to give him shorts and legs. I wasn't really sure how I wanted to do this. I thought about hiding the rest of his body behind a rock, but he's so stylized, I'm not really sure he would look like a boy. So we're going to give him legs. He's going to be a real boy. So I made the shorts out of more matte board and acrylic paint, and I'm making the legs out of little copper wires, just like I did with my real children. Now I'm going to paint these legs black, and then I'm going to paint them black to match the rest of the body. This should give him those little tubular spindly legs that he has on the game. Now back to my tissue paper diffuser. I'm going to add some acrylic medium to it to thicken it up, make it a little tougher and more durable. And then I'm going to glue it in with even more acrylic medium. It works great as a glue and it'll dry clear. I just brushed on the glue, put it in place, and then left it to dry. No measuring for me. I'll just come back later and trim off the excess. While that's drying, I'm going to go ahead and glue on my boy's legs. Yes, sir. He's going to like these legs. This was a really finicky process. Man, I just fiddled around with this for probably about 4 or 5 minutes straight, trying to line them up with my X-Acto knife and get them perfect. I eventually got what I wanted. It wasn't too bad. I don't really like working on this really tiny scale, but it is what it is. After all, the book nook does have to fit on the shelf. Something else that would have made this process a little easier is if I had my cyanoacrylite glue accelerator. So any kind of CA glue, super glue that uses cyanoacrylite, you can use an accelerant in it to make it dry almost instantly. But my bottle of accelerator apparently leaked out into my backpack, which now my backpack smells like that good car air freshener cherry smell that comes with a lot of accelerators, but I have no accelerant left. But once I got the legs placed and the glue dried, I came back over and caked on a bunch of black paint, once again to kind of solidify my boy and make him look like he's a little more solid and a little more 3D. Now it's time to make my spider. And since this method worked so terribly before, I think I'm going to do it again because I still can't find my spray-on adhesive. And it worked well enough. I mean, yeah, I had to use scissors instead of an X-Acto knife. But since I'm going to paint over all this with black acrylic paint anyway, it doesn't really matter. So to keep the process moving, I'm just going to do this and get it done. That way I can move on to the next step. If you wanted to keep the imagery that you printed out, you would definitely want to wait and buy some spray-on adhesive. That way you get to keep a nice pristine picture on here. Wow, what a fantastic mess. That is just something special. All's well that ends well. Now that I struggled through that, I'm ready to move over to the painting station. I'm just going to lay this on my silicone palette. That way I can be very fast and loose and free with this, and I don't have to worry about cleaning up later. I can just wash this silicone palette off or wait till it dries and peel all the paint off in one layer. I like to be consistent and keep just a pattern of good ideas and bad ideas flowing. One more coat of paint on our hero and he should be finished. And with that, he's ready to be glued in place. Look at that, he was just born a few days ago and already he's standing on his own. At this point, I think I want to mock it up again, turn on the light, and just see where I want my spider to go. Also, it looks like our diffuser is going to work quite nicely. So let's take it apart again. We've got our spider, and we also have our spider food. Boy. I think he turned out quite well. I'm proud of him. He is my special boy. And I hope you guys like him as well. As you can see, I'm mocking it up again one more time just to see if the spider fits and find the exact placement. I know I'm mocking it up a lot, but I just want to make sure everything is right before I put it together. It's a lot easier to double check than it is to go back and fix a lot of mistakes. Now that I know exactly where I want my spider, I'm just going to mark it out on this tree with a pencil, and then I'm going to come back in with my hot glue gun and secure it in place. So here are my markings. I know exactly where to place my spider back after I put on the glue. Alright, now he has a new home and he is ready to torment some prepubescent humans. That's right, I'm mocking it up again. Now that I'm satisfied that nothing has changed, I'm going to go ahead and drill some holes so that I can mount a battery holder to the back of my book nook. First I need to mock it up and then mark out where all the holes are with a pencil. Now I know exactly where to drill my holes. Now that we've perforated it, let's go ahead and test it out and see if it works. Installation achieved. You might be wondering why I keep fiddling with the battery. I'm just testing it out to see how well it holds it in place. Now that I'm finally satisfied that it's going to hold the battery securely, it's time to go ahead and add some spider webs. I'm using this Fabri-Tac glue. It makes very believable spider webs. You just want to touch the glue to whatever you want to have spider webs, and then string it about like so. It's okay if a little falls here and there. I don't think that ruins the believability of it one bit. As you can see, the longer I'm at this, the more these things start to look like actual spider webs. If you ever thought to yourself, you know, there's not enough spider webs in my life, I think Fabri-Tac is the glue for you. I have no idea what it's actually used for. I'm guessing from the name that you use it to glue fabric together, but I've just always seen YouTubers use this stuff to make spider webs, and so that's the only reason I've ever bought it. You can also use it to make monster drool. There we go. Now let's see if our spider still fits. I could have went with a more organized pattern for the spider webs, but given the close quarters, I just decided to do whatever looked and felt right to me at the time, and I think they turned out really well. Now we're on to the frame. I'm just going to use a couple of scraps of wood here. These were just shavings from cuts that I'd made previously. I was probably making panels to paint on. I'm going to hold this piece of wood up here so I can see how long I need to make it. Then I'll just make the cut, and then I'll split it in half so that I'll have two identical pieces. The cuts don't have to be perfect. The look I'm going for is the shoddy scaffolding and tree houses and things that you find in the woods, whose mysterious inhabitants you never really find out about in the game, other than some brief violent encounters. Now I'm just cutting the top post on my bandsaw, and we're ready to glue these pieces into place. I'm just going to be using some Elmer's wood glue. But first I need to mock these pieces up and make some final adjustments before gluing them down. Once I'm satisfied, I'll just use the piece that I got correct and use it as a boilerplate for the other side. Now that all the pieces are finished, it's time to start gluing these bad boys into place. I put some clamps on here to press the wood down and keep pressure on it until the glue dries. I'll check on it tomorrow, but while I wait, it's time to start working on the rope that's going to go around the frame. This is a monochromatic game, so we're going to be dyeing our rope black. For the rope, I'm going to be using a piece of twine that I got out of my supply closet. We're just going to be mixing in some water and black acrylic paint. Once it all soaks in, we should have just a disgusting mess. We'll leave that to dry also. Even though this is real wood, the wood in the game is very distressed. It looks like it's been weathered and left out in the woods for a long time. So we're going to exaggerate that and score this piece up with our X-Acto. As you can see, I'm pulling the blade away from my fingers. That's the proper use of this kind of tool. I'm kind of just slicing along where I think the wood grain would be. The whole time I'm being mindful of where my fingers are in relationship with the blade. Now for a coat of black paint, and let's check on our rope. Though it looks a little bit disgusting while it's still wet, once it's dried, the effect is quite nice. The string is dyed, and we've got that monochromatic look again. Now I just have to find an aesthetically pleasing way to arrange this that looks interesting. I'm just going to be tacking it into place with a little bit of hot glue, being careful not to get hot glue strings everywhere, if that's even possible. Physicists are hard at work trying to find answers to these questions. I think that looks pretty nice, but my rope is a little long, so I gotta trim it. While playing around with it, I thought it might look nice kind of draped over the front, so I decided to tack it in place there with some more hot glue. We have to carefully micromanage spending large quantities of time and effort to make it look like we didn't care and we just haphazardly threw it on there, as we casually walked by on our way to be the keynote speaker at a large event. Large but tasteful. Wow, this thing's really coming together. Nothing left now but the glamour shots. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing.
You know me, I won't be surprised if you leave, I'll wear a disguise. Darling, don't you wait for me. Tonight I won't be coming.
Just smash those buttons, smash any button you see, just smash it whenever you see one.